This is a little bit about the Incubation Network. As I mentioned, there is a little video here that we'd love to share with you. Please feel free to take a look at it and watch it on your own time. But this is today's agenda. So here we are now. We have three great speakers here today to talk about a variety of topics ranging across the plastic credits project pipeline. So we have Ellen here to talk all about the plastic credits 101, everything you need to know to get started, what they are, if they're relevant to you at all. And then we have Komal from Verra. She's going to talk about what it's like to get certified for your plastic credits project. And we'll end with Sebastian, who can talk a little bit about how to scale your plastic credits project. So whether you're new to the topic or you're already engaged in a plastic credits project yourself, we have a little bit of something for everyone here today. So that's all I have for you now. Let's just jump into it. We have the first presenter, Ellen. She's going to be doing Plastic Credits 101. And Ellen, I'm just going to hand the screen over for you to share your slides.
Terrific. Thanks so much, everyone. Nice to be here. Thanks, Hannah. Can you see my slides?
Yeah, looks good.
Super. Terrific. So just for a little bit of context, I lead impact and insights on the program side of the Circulate initiative and have been close partners and founders of the Incubation Network overall. So glad that you all are here. My camera is off right now because my bandwidth is not so great, so I want to make sure that I stay with you through this intro. So a little bit of context, about 2 years ago now, we started to look at this topic at the time very, very, very early on. And I'm so glad to be rejoining the conversation with the other panelists today. The point of this part is just to give you kind of an overall overview summary of the plastic credit mechanism, and then we'll get into the details, I'm sure, as we go along with the conversation. So just to start off, the origin of credits to support recycling and plastic credits really actually came, interestingly, from an extended producer responsibility policy in Brazil, led by an organization called Vive Rio, where the government wanted to create a market mechanism that would allow companies to comply with EPR while at the same time recognizing the work of waste pickers in the system to collect and sort recyclable waste. The system was very basic. There was no standard necessarily, but really the point was to get credits out to the informal sector and recover more material. So now we're in a world of plastic credits 2.0. There's been a lot of attention on the plastic pollution issue and how we address it. When you think about a circular economy for plastics, right? There's the overall value chain that starts from recovering and collecting material, sorting it, processing it, remanufacturing it, designing additional materials, including single-use plastic packaging that can be recycled further, et cetera. So these things in an ideal system are, in theory, what will work with good economics and strong markets. Now, the challenge here in a lot of the mismanaged waste we see is that that initial collection and recovery relies on infrastructure that's not so formal, not so well developed, but is being done in large part by individual workers, waste pickers that are doing that work, and they are the infrastructure. How do they participate in this economy? They often can't, or the systems that more formally would recover that material don't have viable business models on their own. Plastic credits are intended to help to fund some of those activities. So how it works. The basics here are essentially, based on a standard for what we mean when we're talking about a plastic that we're trying to recover or recycle. You create a standard and a protocol and a mechanism for registering and auditing that. A specific project that is going to handle that material can do so and receive in exchange a plastic credit. The project developer then can access funding to sell that credit that claims essentially what we're working with typically is 1 credit equals 1 ton of plastic, generated against the additional volumes that are recovered, and then that project developer can sell that and earn money for it. That money might go back to the project itself, and you get the claim for the buyer. So that's in theory how it works. And we have Verra and PCX on the call today who represent different players in this whole system. It's an opportunity to kind of reinvigorate the economics, if you will. Now, the current landscape, it's very new, right? We have this as an emerging topic for a reason. There is not a very well-established marketplace for plastic credits at the moment. We have several individual players playing a role in this space. And the projects that we see that are accessing credits, at least publicly, they're generally really emphasizing the work that's being done at the cleanup stage. So recovering material from the environment, for example, is an aspect of this that plastic credits can play a role in, and it's important work that needs to be done when we think about overall management of plastic pollution and keeping it out of the ocean and the environment. The material that's recovered should be mentioned, as some of you are likely aware, is low value, can be quite contaminated, often and most likely very hard, if not impossible, to recycle given current technologies and current economics. And so we find that these projects are typically sending the material for reprocessing or co-processing for use as fuel, right? So if it's being incinerated or it's being managed, but when we think about the overall circular economy, again, this isn't a solution that is the ideal for the system. So, we get the benefit of incentivizing the activity to recover the material, but we don't get that overall market development aspect. The other piece of it, I would say, is probably likely that we don't know as much about is, and hopefully the informal workers are benefiting from these plastic credits, and a number of the programs that exist are out there and talk very explicitly about their intention to do that. So that's an important aspect of all of this that should not be forgotten, even as we talk about the environmental impacts and whether or not the credit mechanism can deliver on that. Oops, sorry. So, if the vision is really overall to drive the recovery of material in that circular economy, the reality today is that the projects are very much at the end of the line in terms of recovery, and the material is then going for co-processing or incineration. Then there's a bit of a disconnect. And so we're seeing at this moment a range of activities that are happening. It is quite confusing, so trying to shed more light on it with a number of entities trying to play that intermediary role to help create plastic credits and help to drive more funding or financing into the system. If we think about it from a systemic perspective, we, I think, also are seeing a bit of a disconnect in terms of the ability of individual projects to truly build infrastructure that can be sustained and viable in the long run. The influence that individual projects or even the informal sector have to improve those systemic issues are still fairly limited. The material itself, right, the quality is quite challenging in many cases, and so recyclables may or may not be managed in the way that we hope they should be. And the need for better standardization and transparency overall, I think, is still a gap that we see as individual actors have been making claims and providing certifications as part of their funding model or their business model. But overall, the system, I think, still needs a host of solutions to address the problem. So it is early days, and the plastic credit mechanism is a tool, right, that can be used in a number of different ways. I think it's important for those of you in the position of being a startup, an innovator in this space, to appreciate some of the concerns that are out there from other stakeholders. So if there are competing standards with variable requirements, it can create confusion. What is the claim, and how does a consumer understand it? How does a large buyer or brand understand it? As I said before, the lack of transparency and ability for independent validation, I think, is something that certainly needs to be tested and has been an issue in the past. And we see good trends in that direction with the Verra standard and its intention to have third-party verifications, that we make sure that there's better assurances and credibility behind some of those claims so that we avoid greenwashing. The challenge with the system today also is a tremendous amount of fragmentation, right? And so there is the ability or the risk, let's say, of double counting as different actors in that chain of custody from the source to final material have the potential to claim credit or to sell a credit based on the same material. So that's a concern that folks may have. I think the issue when we think about livelihoods and the role that the informal sector plays, we are keenly aware that they are challenged to have influence in the system. And so any mechanism that is put out there to, in theory, help them, it, I think, needs to be coupled with technical assistance and support to ensure that the informal sector can take advantage of such opportunities, but also directly benefit from them. And the ability for us to know the extent to which a plastic credit does that is mixed. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, the overall success of a viable and robust circular economy for plastics needs to involve a great deal of infrastructure and resources throughout that whole value chain. And the individual projects that a plastic credit mechanism might support helps in part to get some of the near-term issues addressed, i.e. Pollution in the environment and cleanup and material that doesn't have viable end markets today. But ultimately, it isn't necessarily going to be the salve for those bigger foundational systems issues that we see in the long run when we think about the long-term opportunities. In Asia in particular, I think that is one of the key messages. So if you're looking to work in this space, it's absolutely something that can be a near-term opportunity. And I would just encourage all of you to think about the long-term role that it plays, because the market is so dynamic. And in Asia in particular, we're seeing so much activity on lots of fronts. The investment space in particular has to be addressing infrastructure, human and otherwise, and the local waste and recycling systems so that we can have more effective solutions in the long run. There's finally just like something that I'd say on carbon credits is something we could learn from. There have been different perspectives on carbon credits, and certainly there is not one type of carbon credit that I think we've learned there are good and bad ones. It can be a useful tool, especially for raising awareness and engaging certain actors that otherwise did not feel like they had the ability to get involved. But I think we also would recognize that we have a long way to go in terms of the strategies that need to be put in place to address climate change. And the carbon credit market is a limited tool in that regard from an impact perspective. So moving in the right direction, I think these are, we're glad to see the trends towards greater harmonization and greater standards. It's a really critical piece of this puzzle. Definitely, we do need to think about livelihoods, and this is a way that we can through the projects that are seem to be accessing those plastic credits. With greater transparency and third-party assurances, we'll have greater abilities to be credible with a plastic credit, and that the focus does seem to be switching from those who might be an intermediary playing a role in developing a project to actually building the infrastructure themselves and doing that work themselves. That sort of integration, I think, is key in making sure that our supply chains remain or can continue to develop efficiently and effectively. So, the harmonization issues and what still needs work, there's a lot here that is still to come in terms of maturity of the plastic credits system. So I think as you as startups are thinking about how you play a role, I would say that you can think about how you can contribute to overall systems improvements, investments in true infrastructure, linking to important other strategies, including policy and more systemic solutions. And that the bigger opportunities at the end of the day might be kind of working a little bit more upstream so that, we have more ability to influence what today is not being managed. So with that, I will pause there, quick overview on 101, and very happy to go deeper on any of these topics in the Q&A.
Next, we have Komal from Verra. She will be talking to you guys today about certifying your plastic credits project. So Komal, take it away.
Thanks, Hannah, and thank you, Ellen, for a very insightful presentation. I think a lot of very interesting and valid points made, and I'd love to also sort of answer any questions related to that. The way, Verra thinks about some of these issues that Ellen highlighted, harmonization and lack of a single global standard and so on. But yeah, just starting off. So I'm Komal. I am the Director of Plastic and Sustainable Development Policy and Markets at Verra. And in this role, I basically leading the policy engagement and market development of two programs at Verra. One is the Sustainable Development Verified Impact Standard, or SD-VISTA, and second is the plastic standard, the Plastic Waste Reduction Standard, as you all know it. So starting off, moving on to the first slide, essentially, over the last few years, plastic credits have gained a lot of prominence as a promising market instrument to drive investments into chronically underfunded waste management operations, and also increase recycling rates in regions that lack access to the sort of finance in order to scale up meaningful interventions. Ellen highlighted the need for a robust global standard in order to certify plastic credit projects, and that's what I'm here to talk about today, is Verra's Plastic Waste Reduction Standard, or the Plastic Standard. As most of you may know, Verra owns and operates the Plastic Standard that was launched early last year, that basically provides the rules and requirements for consistent accounting and crediting of plastic waste collection and recycling projects globally. And over the course of this presentation, I would try to provide you with more details on how the Plastic Standard is used to issue plastic credit projects. But before getting into the details of it, just a very quick organizational overview of Verra. So Verra is a global not-for-profit that was founded in 2007, helping to tackle some of the world's most intractable environmental and social challenges by developing and managing a range of standards that can be used by the private sector, the governments, and the civil society bodies in order to help meet their ambitious climate and development goals. One of the oldest standards that we have been operating and managing is the Verified Carbon Standard, which is used for the GHG emission credit certification. It's been around for a long time and is also one of the oldest and most successful, with more than 1,800 projects registered till date across 70 countries. The way we basically develop and manage standards follows the ISIM principle. So we convene a diverse range of stakeholders who develop workable frameworks in order to drive finance towards high-performing projects, policies, or actions. And on the screen, you can see a range of standards that Verra has been involved in development and management of. But today, we'll specifically focus on the plastic waste reduction standard. So moving on to the next slide, before we deep dive into the presentation itself, I just want to play a very short explainer video on plastic credits, just to help set the context for the rest of the presentation. So Hannah, could we have the audio on the presentation?
Thousand A380 jets are estimated to end up in the oceans every year. As a result of overproduction, the underlying take, make, dispose model of the economy, and inadequate waste management. How can we tackle the plastic pollution crisis? Within its value chain, a company should eliminate and minimize unnecessary plastic, design packaging for reuse and recycling, opt for more sustainable materials, and improve end-of-life management. Even in the best scenario, where a company employs all of those strategies, it will still have unavoidable plastic waste leakage. To compensate for the plastic pollution they cannot yet prevent, companies can invest in extended producer responsibility schemes and plastic credits projects. An EPR scheme is a policy approach where producers are held responsible for the costs of end-of-life management of their products or packaging. EPR schemes have positive effects up and down the value chain, making them an ideal tool to push the economy towards circularity. However, they can take many years to design and successfully implement. That's when plastic credits enter the scene. Plastic credits are transferable units representing a specific quantity of plastic that has been prevented from entering the environment through collection and/or recycling. Projects that generate plastic credits can jumpstart and complement EPR schemes by driving funds towards circular infrastructure. Plastic crediting is an innovative financial tool that can bring investment into plastic waste collection systems and new recycling ventures. This new form of finance can also drive social and environmental improvements through the value chain. For example, they support local economies, provide living wages for waste pickers, and generate new job opportunities. Plastic credits must be generated from new, additional activities in order to guarantee investment in increased collection and recycling capacity. Transparent reporting, monitoring, and independent auditing of waste management and recycling systems are all key components of credible plastic crediting. What comes next? Civil society, businesses and governments working together on plastic credits is one way to bring increased capacity and accountability to waste management projects. Global cooperation to increase the circularity of plastic is crucial. We can all be part of the change. Find out more at RRR Initiative.
Thank you, Hannah. Will we just go back to the slide?
One moment.
All right. So yeah, moving on. So I'll try to give you a little bit of detail on the plastic program. So the plastic program has 4 components, the center of which is the plastic standard, which I just introduced, which provides you with the rules and requirements for registering of a plastic credit project. It also has 3 other modules, the accounting methodologies that provide you with an approved methodology for quantification and accounting of the plastic collected and or recycled through your project. The next is independent auditing, which means that every project that wishes to be registered under Verra's plastic standard needs to be independently audited by an expert third-party agency that is accredited with and approved by Verra. And this step is really critical to ensuring the integrity of our projects. And the last is a registry system. So it's sort of a storehouse of all the data on all the projects that have entered Verra's registration pipeline, including projects registered, the number of plastic credits that have been issued, cancelled, retired, and so on. So it's a publicly available, transparent registry that is accessible to everyone. Moving on, just very quickly. So what are the benefits of the plastic standard? So we've spoken a little bit about what plastic standard is, but in terms of benefits, I think there are two very important characteristics. The first is that it enables accounting of plastic waste collected and or recycled in line with environmental and social safeguards. And this is again something that Ellen hinted upon, which is very critical to ensuring the success of the programs, that there are environmental benefits as well as social benefits delivered to the informal workers and the first mile workers across the value chain. And second is ensuring that the plastic credits are issued only for those projects that are additional, meaning that they're able to demonstrate incremental plastic waste collected or recycled over an established baseline. There are two types of plastic credits that can be generated potentially from the projects. These are waste collection credits and waste recycling credits. And I'll talk about these a little bit more towards the later part of the presentation. These credits can then be used by corporates in order to make very specific sustainability claims, such as net zero plastic leakage, net 100% recycled at end of life, net circular plastic, and so on. And they also have the potential to support extended producer responsibility schemes in a variety of different ways. For example, an EPR scheme that has just started could actually start by investing in plastic standard projects with proven plastic waste collection and or recycling impacts. EPR schemes could also use the plastic standard in order to calculate their scheme's total impact. And companies essentially could potentially buy credits in lieu of paying the EPR fee. So regulators could basically set it up in a way that the companies could be allowed to purchase plastic credits in lieu of paying the EPR fee, thereby directly supporting the plastic waste collection and or recycling projects on the ground and reducing the government's administrative burden. This is very similar to the model that we have seen in Colombia and South Africa in terms of the carbon tax. Now moving on to the scope of the plastic standard on the next slide. So what really is covered under the plastic standard? So all 7 types of plastic, or the serial numbers of the 7 serial numbers of plastics as we know it, plus composite materials are covered under the plastic program for generation of plastic credits. When we say composite materials, it includes the materials that are made up of different layers of different layers of plastics, or plastics combined with other materials, such as it could be paper, cardboard, aluminum foil, metal foils, and so on. Moving on to the type of activities that are covered under the plastic program. So a range of plastic waste collection and recycling activities are eligible. These include informal waste collection activities, community waste collection, municipal or private waste collection, infrastructure development, and mechanical and chemical recycling. Moving on to the next slide, I think it's very important to highlight the quality assurance principles of the plastic standard. So there are 7 quality assurance principles that underpin the plastic standard to ensure that it follows a rigorous framework and a rigorous process of assessment and generation of plastic credits. The first one is real, meaning that the project should be able to demonstrate that the plastic waste collection or recycling activity has actually happened on ground. Independently audited is something that I just highlighted a couple of minutes back. So there are accredited independent experts that have been approved by Verra, and every project that aims to get registered should be independently audited by these bodies before the project gets registered. Measurable, meaning there should be approved accounting methodologies for quantification of the plastic waste collected and or recycled from the project. Uniquely numbered, meaning every plastic credit generated should have a unique serial number to ensure that there is no double counting. Additional, this sort of is the foundation or cornerstone of how the plastic credits need to be generated, which basically means two things. One is the project should be able to demonstrate incremental collection and or recycling over an established baseline. And second is to be able to demonstrate that this project would not have happened or would not have occurred in the absence of the incentives coming from the plastic credit mechanism. Transparently listed, meaning they should be transparently listed and available on a registry. So we already have a registry system where you can basically track all the projects and the plastic credits that are being generated, used, retired, and so on. And conservatively estimated, you have to use the accounting methodologies and the standard to make sure that the plastic credits are neither under nor overestimated. Now, on the next slide, I will quickly take you through the plastic credits material and credit flow. So how do the materials flow and how are credits generated out of it? And this is a very simplified example, as you can imagine. Multiple iterations of this is possible, but just in terms of context setting, let's imagine that there is an informal worker who's collecting plastic waste from the environment. It is sorted into non-recyclable and recyclable plastic waste. The non-recyclable plastic waste is either sent to a cement can for co-processing or is deposited in a government certified sanitary landfill that meets the requirements of the plastic standard. In this case, this non-recyclable plastic waste has the potential to generate waste collection credits. And the recyclable plastic waste goes through the recycling, gets sorted, goes through the recycling facility, and has the potential to generate waste recycling credits. And one project could also generate both collection and recycling credits, depending upon the end outcomes of where the plastic is going, and also depending upon where the additionality for the project really lies. Moving on. I think we get asked a lot of questions around, we understand all of the basics, but how do we really go about registering a project under the plastic standard? Where do we start? So we have published a very helpful guide on Verra's website, which is called Plastic Program Quick Guide, accessible to everyone. So please feel free to refer to it in case you're interested. But just very quickly, I think there are 3 steps to project registration. The first is you review the plastic program documents and templates that are available on the website to understand eligibility. You review the fee schedule in order to understand what is the estimated initial cost, and then you understand the project life cycle. And during this process, should you have any questions, please feel free to get in touch with us for additional support. So moving on to the next slide, I'll just give you a quick overview of the kind of templates and forms that are available. The first is the plastic standard, which provides you with the rules and requirements, like I mentioned. So everybody should be aware of what the plastic standard is and how do you use that in order to certify your projects. On the next slide, you'll see information about the 2 methodologies. So we have published the plastic waste collection and recycling methodology applicable to the type of project activity you're aiming to register, whether it is a collection activity or whether it is a recycling activity or whether it is a combination of both, in which case you will apply both the methodologies. And the next is basically the fee schedule. So I'm not going to go into the details of it, but it's pretty self-explanatory, as you can see. So there is an account opening fee, there is a registration fee, and there is registration fee and account opening fee are payable one time. And the issuance levy is what is paid every time you plan to get the plastic credits issued from your project. And on the next slide, we have the full project life cycle. Again, without going into full details of it, just let me quickly highlight that there are 4 steps. The first is project listing, project validation and registration, project verification, and plastic credit issuance. Meaning that once you're interested in registering your project, you basically provide the project design document, the project document. It's listed on Verra's website. It undergoes through a 30-day mandatory public comment period, followed by you hire an independent VVB, validation and verification body, who will basically look at the PD and also assess all the documents. And the project will again go through a comment period, and it will be once everything is found to be in order, then it will be registered. Further to registration, you will have to submit the monitoring report, also hire another VVB for verification purposes. So once the project is registered, this again goes through a public commenting period, and the project, if all the documents are found in order, again submitted to Verra for verification request. Once the verification is approved, you will basically request plastic credit issuance. And this can be sort of a periodic cycle. You can request issuance every year, 6 months, couple of years, depending upon your own interest and inclination. And the plastic credits are basically deposited in your account that you've opened towards the beginning of your association with Verra towards the project. So that's kind of in a brief the project life cycle. And the last slide essentially is a quick update on the plastic standard. So plastic standard was launched, the entire plastic program essentially was launched as of early last year. And since then we have glad to inform that we have the first project registered by an organization known as Second Life Thailand. The first plastic credit from the project have also issued in March. Other than that, we have 6 other projects that are at various stages of registration and verification. I think more than a dozen projects that are requesting listing. So quite a huge amount of interest and interest in the plastic program. It's a very nice geographical spread, as you can see on the slide, but also I think other regions from where we are starting to see projects requesting listing, including multiple regions in India, South Asia, Southeast Asia, and also across the global South. So that sort of concludes the presentation, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about the plastic program or the registration process in particular. So yeah, thank you.
And finally, but not least, we have Sebastian coming to us from PCX. So I'm just going to go ahead and hand it over.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me, and a couple of hard acts to follow, but I'll do my best. So I am the CEO of Plastic Credit Exchange and Plastic Credit Exchange Markets, PCX Markets, which I will explain the relationship there in just a moment as we get into the material. Let me pull that up. And I want to build on what you just heard from the previous 2 speakers. So I couldn't agree more that we're all sharing a common mission, right? To try to contribute to the end of the plastic waste crisis globally. And that really is our mission at PCX. But the challenges that were highlighted are very real, right? The challenges are a fragmentation, a lack of scale, a lack of economic incentives, a lack of infrastructure, and a lack of consistency and transparency. And so our mission and the purpose of PCX and PCX Markets in particular from a commercialization perspective is essentially to develop a scalable, frictionless marketplace for plastic credits, for verified plastic credits. And so I'm going to walk you through a little bit of how that works and how we see this market developing. So first of all, this is really just to reiterate the points made by the previous speakers in that really, what is the role of credits? The role of credits is to create a flywheel for this ecosystem to scale, to create the funding mechanisms, the incentives for those who will provide the funding to earn or to be able to retire credits and to verify that they are retired credits, and for them to provide funding for not just the credits themselves, and I will talk about this in a moment, but also funds that help invest in the infrastructure required to establish and expand these projects over time. And so when we sell credits to our customers, we also offer the ability to have a bit of a sliding scale of how much investment goes towards infrastructure investment versus the actual offsetting credits themselves. And I'll get into that a bit in a moment. So back to the challenge. This is a really conceptual picture of this ecosystem, right? Highly fragmented. You have a number of players on the right-hand side who either because of EPR legislation or for voluntary reasons, they're a sustainability brand or they're a consumer who cares or they're an event that wants to be net zero plastic waste. They all have different incentives for wanting to support the kinds of projects that are being developed and operated on the left-hand side of the page. Yet it is really hard for them to identify projects that fit their requirements and their interests and their priorities. It's really hard for them to understand the cost of doing it. It's really scary for them as to whether those projects are verifiable and trustworthy and whether they're going to be double counted or they're going to be accused of greenwashing. And on the other hand, on the other side of the page, you have the players who are trying to make this all work, right? Starting with the project developers themselves who have an ambition to establish and grow large-scale projects that can have large-scale impact and can actually be operated in a reasonably sustainable economic manner. And then you have standards providers like Verra, You have third-party auditors, which Verra has referred to, government agencies, NGOs, et cetera. But all of this is a fragmented mess, right? And there's very little coordination, and it's an incredibly inefficient and ineffective model, which is why it's not yet taking off and scaling. So we view ourselves as a catalyst to enable scale. And it comes in a couple of different forms. I'm going to spend most of the time today talking about the blue bubbles here from the commercialization perspective, but just very quickly, the history of PCX, Plastic Credit Exchange, it was established as a nonprofit in the Philippines that was actually even initially a project developer through an organization called HOPE, but also back in 2018, 2019, established the first publicly accessible, third-party audited, registry-based standard for plastic credits called PPRS. Now, we are, and I'm going to be very clear here, we are a big fan of Verra credits and their standards, but we also have a standard that PCX established years ago for plastics that we still maintain and that is still operated and iterated on. We're about to release version 7 of that, which is very consistent with all the things that Verra referred to, with third-party auditing, with a public registry, et cetera, et cetera. And that is operated by the nonprofit of PCX. They also operate some consulting services for buyers of credits to help them reduce their plastic footprint. We have a plastic footprint calculator, all of this in an effort to make this as frictionless and as low cost as possible for both sides of the equation. And then they also, through our nonprofit, provide a net zero eco label, which again requires third-party auditing of a footprint, requires a 3-year commitment, and then people can, brands or companies can earn a net zero eco label. So all of that is sort of residing in a nonprofit side of PCX, but we wanted to bring sort of a holistic solution to bear. So what we've now established, and I'm going to show you in a moment, is essentially a marketplace for plastic credits, where we are taking the friction out of the purchasing process. We're providing full transparency on project characteristics, certification, registry, everything through the platform. And then even pricing. I saw there was a question in the chat around what is the pricing for credits. We actually have fully transparent pricing on all of the credits that are listed on our marketplace. And so I'm going to show you that in just a moment. And this is really just, I'll skip past this and I'll show you the live marketplace in a moment. But it is essentially, I get made fun of, but I call it the Airbnb of plastics because it allows you to filter and browse based on your interests as a buyer. We already have over 100,000 metric tons of annual capacity of credits on the platform. We have a couple dozen partners already, projects listed. They are all certified. Most of them are PPRS certified. However, you just heard about Second Life, which is the first Verra certified project in Thailand. They have listed on our marketplace. So the point here being, we're not being biased against projects that are not listed or are not certified with PPRS. They do need to be certified on one of 3 standards right now, because we do believe in the convergence of standards. The 3 standards that are acceptable to be listed on our marketplace, because they are public, because they have a public registry, because they involve third-party auditing, are Verra, PPRS from PCX, and ocean-bound plastics. Any other marketplace or any other standard with another marketplace, if they are not adhering to those requirements that were highlighted earlier in the earlier presentation, we will not be able to list them on our marketplace. But there are options for how you can get certified and listed. And we have a pipeline of several 100,000 metric tons of capacity that is in the certification process right now, with, you know, line of sight to many more. And we're very happy that Verra has more projects in their pipeline as well, because we're having discussions with some of those players also about joining our marketplace. Just a sort of baseline, as I mentioned, PCX has been around for a while. It was already an established operation centered in the Philippines, but with projects now, as you can see, in India, in Indonesia, in Thailand, in other markets. We're about to launch projects in Mexico and other places. But we have a pretty broad set of partners on the buying side of the credits, so large brands, as well as associations like Alliance to End Plastic Waste. who are purchasers of our credits on our marketplace. And over the last couple of years, we've, had some pretty meaningful impact, and not just in terms of the plastic collection and diversion from nature, but also on the socioeconomic impacts. And as was highlighted earlier, some of the most popular projects on our platform that are even more expensive than what I would describe as more industrial, but still additional projects, happen to be ones that have a socioeconomic benefit, that have a community-based collection. That, one of our most popular projects is female micro entrepreneurs who run a waste to cash program where they collect plastic from the community that wouldn't have been collected otherwise. So it's additional, and they earn part of their living from doing that, and the program supports them in that. So how do you get listed? It's actually really straightforward. First and foremost, you got to get accredited. You got to go through, as I mentioned, you have to go through PPRS, through Verra, or Ocean-Bound Plastics. Will other standards be added over time? Maybe. Right now, none of those standards have met the hurdle that these three have. So these are the three that we are willing to list. And just to reinforce why, if we want this marketplace to scale, if we want to have meaningful material impact and bend the curve on the plastic waste crisis, we need large corporate entities to participate and to help fund these projects. And they will not do it if they believe that there isn't trust, there isn't transparency, and there isn't verifiability, because their brands are too valuable and they won't take that risk. So we maintain a very high bar in our marketplace. So once you're certified, you provide that certification, we can list you on PCX markets. You determine the price, but you're seeing the pricing of all the other projects that are out there. Once the credits are sold, you get notified. Your credits have to be on a registry anyway, whether it's the Verra registry or the PPRS registry. We have the ability through APIs to plug into those registries. So once the credit is purchased off of our marketplace, you're notified as a project provider, as a project partner. You then transfer the ownership of that credit through the registry to the purchaser. That gets reported on our public blockchain registry, which is also on the platform, and it's presented on the dashboard of the purchaser, and you get paid for your credits. And as I mentioned, the other opportunity here is in listing your project, there's also the opportunity to say, we're also interested in sponsorship or infrastructure investment, not just credit purchasing. And many of our customers already are very interested in investing in projects. Even USAID is a partner of ours. They've sponsored project expansion of projects in the Philippines. Pepsi has done that, and others have as well. This is just one example of a partner of ours, ZenWTR, that was very eager to achieve not just net zero plastic waste certification for their eco label, but net negative. We've put that net negative on hold because we want to make sure it's material enough, but net zero is a very attractive objective for many of our brand partners. And then they use it not just to satisfy EPR legislation, but they get a lot of marketing value out of it as well. So what I'm going to do just quickly in the time remaining, I want to keep us on time here, is I'm also going to share the live platform itself as opposed to just talking about the slideware. So hopefully everyone can see my screen here on my browser. So this is pcxmarkets.com. And I would encourage all of you to go to this site now or later. You can register very easily. Again, low friction. You just need to put in your email address, and you can register as a buyer. You can also downstream, this is version 1 because it was released about a month ago. You will be able to register directly as a project partner. Right now, it'll just give you instructions on how to contact us to register with us. But we will be automating that process and digitizing that process shortly in the next version. But as you come here, once you've registered, you can literally start to apply filters and look at by country, by plastic type, by processing type, by price range, by cleanup type. And there are other filters, but these are the primary filters. And I'm not going to apply filters, but I'm going to just search all of the projects that are available. And you can see here, there are about 20 projects right now. I mentioned a little over 100,000 metric tons of annual capacity in these projects. And you can browse them and you can see pricing. And if you want to learn more about a given project, in fact, this is the Second Life project right here, that is, hopefully it's loading slowly because of the Zoom. I apologize for that. But you can see here imagery, which we are going to make this marketable imagery for download from the purchasers. And it gives you description and characteristics of every project, its annual capacity, what capacity is still available, the certification, what type of cleanup, what type of aggregation, whether it's recycling or co-processing, and the price point and the vintage. And then if there are other benefits, I can show you another project that talks about women's empowerment, such as the one in the Philippines that I described. All of that information is transparent and available, and you can literally then add credits to your cart, say how many you want. I want to add 50 credits, add it to my cart, and I can go check out immediately. And what I will get is a verification of a hold. I won't be charged immediately. I'll get a verification of a hold until that order can then be transferred through to the project partner for closure, essentially, for retirement and for transference of the ownership, not retirement, but transference of the ownership on the registry, at which time the funds are then taken and passed through to the project partner. The whole point of this is that the biggest challenge that exists today is a lack of the ability to match supply and demand, and the inefficiency and subscale nature of this marketplace. And what we are trying to do is remove that friction and to enable scalability through this platform. So let me stop there. That gives you an idea of how we operate. Happy, as everyone else said, to answer any questions you may have.